Sydney Clark, a New Orleans native, is a multimedia freelancer and current graduate student at the University of Maryland, College Park, studying multi-platform journalism. Sydney also is a contributing editor for Shades Magazine. Welcome, Sydney.
Thank you, Lindsay, and I want to welcome everyone. Before we get started, I just want to just provide a brief paragraph about who we lost yesterday, RBG, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, just to reflect on her life. Ruth Bader Ginsburg, also known as her initials by RBG, she was an American jurist who served as an Associate Justice of the Supreme Court of the United States from 1993 until her death in 2020. She was nominated by President Bill Clinton and was generally viewed as belonging to the liberal wing of the court. Please join me in a brief moment of silence. And before we get into today's topic, I just want to introduce our panelists for today and then ask them to provide just a few words of who RBG was to them. So today we have OFELIA Andrade, a student and aspiring cosmetologist in Glendale, Arizona. THERESA Bertini is a Senior Assistant Director of Admissions at Spring Hill College, living in Chicago. SHARKISHA CUMMINS is a stay-at-home mother of two, an aspiring writer, social worker who lives in Rochester, New York. KERRI EBANKS is the digital manager for the Washington State Democrats in Seattle. And Dominique Howard is an English teacher for Murphy High School in Mobile, Alabama. Welcome, ladies. And if you feel called, you can just share your thoughts on who RBG was to you.
I'll start. I won't say too much, but she wasn't perfect. And I think that's why she was such a hero to so many people, because she never tried to act like she was perfect. I also, in a lot of ways, I'm 24. So in a lot of ways, she kind of became the social media icon. And to some people, we didn't know who she was, and through her workout videos showing that she was still surviving with cancer, those little videos showed that she was human and showed that, she was this idol to little girls everywhere, and it was a realistic idol. It wasn't someone that, we could never meet. She seemed like someone that we could meet and get coffee with and, learn from, and we're still going to learn from her even though she's gone.
Thank you, THERESA. Anyone else before we get into today's topic?
I just wanted to say I completely agree with THERESA. She completely changed how the law views gender and what women can do. And I know my sister is an aspiring lawyer, so I texted her this morning. I was like, hey, are you okay? She's like, yeah, I'm fine. So just to know that there was someone like her on the Supreme Court, that meant so much, especially to women like my sister who are aspiring to be someone like her and fighting for gender equality and for the rights of all people. It's a terrible loss, but I'm happy that she did what she did, and she paved the way for so many people in the future.
Thanks, Dom.
And I just want to piggyback off of what Dom said, like all that she's done for gender equality, and even much more for just humanity and civil rights. And most importantly, what she's been to for all women, not just like white women, not just Black women, right? What she's been to all women in terms of just being someone we could look up to. She, was, appointed at like age 60, right? She was appointed fairly late in the game, but that just showed me like you can take your time and do the work, and it's worth doing the work.
That's awesome, KERRI. Alrighty, so today's discussion will cover social media and elections 2020. And as you know, this election cycle is none like any other in history. And we hope to learn a little about what our 5 members of our #RealTalk crew think about how social media and even the news media contribute to people's opinions. And so I want to get into our questions. So this is an opening question for all of y'all. And it is, what social media platform do you like the most or use pretty consistently, and why? And
Oh, I'm so excited. I love Facebook. And I know that probably makes me sound like, kind of older, but Facebook is my thing. And I just feel like, I don't know, it kind of disappeared for a while. People were like, oh, we don't use Facebook. But it's like come back in this way that's so powerful and strange and scary. And I sit on it for hours and I need to get my life together. But yes, I love Facebook. That's all.
Thanks, Dom.
I think the platform I use the most right now is probably TikTok. I don't know if that counts, but
Yes, that does count.
there's so much information. I'm sorry?
It's a social platform. It counts.
Okay, yeah. There's so much information on there. I mean, it covers literally everything. And I think I've learned more on TikTok in like the past 2 months than I've done in college and school and life and like my whole 38 years. So, I mean, I don't know if that's good or bad, but that is 100% the truth.
Thank you for sharing.
I could not agree more about TikTok. Like, it is, my number one platform is Twitter, but Twitter can very easily become toxic. And people are so mean on Twitter. They're so mean. So the minute that happens, I'm on the TikTok and I love it. There's so much, it's so true. There's so much I've learned. I have learned little fun facts about cleaning my apartment to then fun facts about the correct way to vote or the correct way that if, let's say a government representative isn't listening to you, they'll tell you what to do. It's amazing. I mean, I know I'm too old for TikTok and I'm 24. So, it's made for a generation that younger than us. And I'm glad that that generation is learning so much information so quickly.
That's awesome. Thanks, Theresa.
Not too old for TikTok, Theresa. I will tell you that, like, even people that are older than us are like still active users. But I also would like if you would stop giving Twitter a bad rep. Twitter has been doing its justice since what, like 2009. It's been there. It's been through everything with us. I have 24,000 tweets to prove it. And it's just, I don't know. It's just calming, funny. It's just like everything all in one. I am more on the serious end of Twitter now, and so not the funny end of Twitter, where people make jokes about everything. Like, I am more on the like everyone's mourning Ruth Bader Ginsburg, right? No one's like the whole like, what are we gonna do about this or that? Like, everyone's mourning her as we should. So yeah.
And OFELIA, what about you?
I would say I would agree with KERRI that I love Twitter. Twitter's my number one girl. It's my go-to because, like Theresa was saying with TikTok, I love TikTok too, but I don't see as much information as I do get on Twitter because I am pretty active on there. Twitter is really amazing. It does provide, I could be shown a meme in like 0.2 seconds, and then the next 0.2 seconds there's political and like all this other like information coming in. So that's what I love about Twitter. It's very diverse the topics that are on their feed, very much so is my number one.
Awesome. I think for me, my leader is Twitter right now, even though that wasn't the case like a few months ago. I wasn't active on Twitter at all. And then once I started using it, just playing around with it and just seeing more how it works, I really enjoy it now. So like, I love Black Twitter and just like seeing what people are saying about my favorite shows. So it's just like a fun way to just like release, even though like there's so much news on it. But okay, so for my next question, how do you typically get your news or stay up to date with what's going on? What are some news outlets or publications that you follow closely on social media?
So it's funny that you say this because when RBG died last night, so it's been RBG, Kobe, and trying to think of who else, but they're almost every, sorry, what did you say?
John Lewis.
Yes, and John Lewis, thank you. All three of their deaths I found from Twitter, all three. And it's I read a tweet yesterday that said, for our generation, Twitter is the morning newspaper. And it blew my mind because it's true. I mean, when I wake up, I open Twitter, I see what happened. I get the notifications from Twitter that show, you know, what is going on. I get the current events, and it really is my morning news. It's like I could get a cup of coffee and read Twitter. It's insane.
I agree with Theresa, actually. I never even saw it like that, but I like to get my news from NPR's podcast Up First. It's very quick, and I can just do it in like 12 minutes, I think. And I just like scroll through like several different news sites, and also there's the Apple News app and certain things like that. But I work in digital content, right? And so as Sydney mentioned, I'm the digital manager for the Washington State Democrats. And so my job is to know what's like trending and what's the topics for the day. So the first thing I do before I go and like see what the news has reported on, right? I go and see what the news has reported on versus what like actually trending on Twitter, right? Because we have to be up to date and like, you know, up on all the hot topics and all the hot news. So even though like I do get my news in other places, like Twitter is the ultimate source of how I honestly like value that news for my digital content. Of course, if something's really bad or really great, like we're gonna post about it and I'm gonna like share it. Of course, I find other stories that aren't just like hot topics on Twitter, but you know, it's important to be a part of the discussion rather just ignoring it.
Mm-hmm. I get a lot of mine from TikTok because like, I mean, breaking news, they're like on it and there are videos up and they're like link in bio for more information. I actually also get like, oddly enough, like news content from like a lot of my political news content from like news information from like Instagram. There's like a person I follow who's like news, not noise. So she like doesn't pick a side. She just basically reports the facts. So it's like good because it's unbiased opinions and this is actually what's going on. It's not right or left leaning. It's just, this is the pure facts and you can like draw your own conclusions from that. And Facebook, I think too, like a lot of posts. And I mean, you got to really be careful on Facebook because there are a lot of, you know, like fake articles and things that just aren't true or that you just have to kind of vet it yourself and do your own independent research to make sure that the information being shared is accurate or, you know, not being kind of just pulled out. But yeah, those are like where I get my information.
Awesome. Yeah, I definitely get like 90% of my information from Facebook, and then I have to go like, is this real, Dom? And I'm like, okay, let's go to Google. But I also get like nightly emails from the New York Times, so that's a great one. I think if you're looking for a way to get like the news, you know, like every day, I get the New York Times and I get like 3 or 4 emails a day from them, and I just cycle through that and I like try to find what's interesting to me. And then always NPR, I love NPR. So I try to find something interesting at least once a day and read something that's kind of important and matters and not just like funny stuff on Facebook all the time. And then Apple News. Like I just started getting into Apple News and actually looking at that now that I'm older. And I've really gone to appreciate that more. But definitely, just like Sharkisha said, I'm all on Facebook. When RBG died, I was like, wait, what? And then I was like, oh my goodness, like, is this real? And I was like, you know, they like to do those little hoaxes on Facebook. So I had to like triple check and it was real. And I got like, real sad about it. But I was like, I'm happy that like I was exposed to that and I got to see it and got to see it for myself and do the research and make sure it was true. Because Facebook does lead you down a rabbit hole sometimes and you have to triple check stuff. People like to play games, but yeah.
Thanks, that's awesome.
I just lost my train of thoughts. That's great. Well, okay, now I have it. So I usually use Twitter or the Apple News on my phone. Twitter, it's usually pretty really good when it comes to giving me news, and I actually prefer going on Twitter for most of my news because half the time when I go to the actual like news websites or like watch the news, I don't see half the stuff on there that I see on Twitter. So that makes me upset, but it also makes me happy because I have older parents that aren't able to see the stuff that's on Twitter. And so I'll go up to them and I'll be like, here, look what's going on in our world. And they're like, I didn't even know that's happening. And it just blows my mind, because how is like controversial stuff being covered on a social media platform but not on the actual news itself? And I think that's a real problem, and I wish that would be fixed. But I'm sure Twitter will take over one day and everyone will use that for their main news and source. But yeah, I do follow NPR on there. NPR is a really great source of information. I love them. I've sworn by them ever since sophomore year, so love them.
That's awesome. Yeah. And then I'm kind of piggybacking off of what Sharkisha said, but this is a question that comes from Janice Lee. And she asks, where do you all get your posts about election news or like political news?
See, now that one is Instagram. Almost all of my information that I get about the election, I religiously watch AOC go live on Instagram. She has enlightened me in ways that I didn't even know I needed. I was actually studying abroad for the 2016 election, so I was very out of the loop with a lot. So I think my privilege came out because I wasn't in the States. So now that I'm here for this upcoming election, you know, I'm trying to learn from both sides, but I think AOC hits a lot with the younger generation that has no idea what's going on. So she doesn't talk to people like they're stupid. She educates on a level that multiple people will understand. But yeah, I get 99% of my posts from Instagram, and then anything I post, I put onto my Instagram story as well.
Yeah, I follow on Instagram Jessica Ellen, I think her name is, and basically what she does, she just breaks down like what's happening in the world. It's just pure fact. She doesn't pick a side. She's not right or left leaning. She just says, this is what happened. These are the current laws that have just been rolled out. These are the people it's impacting. These are the people who made that decision. Just kind of, I mean, you can just draw your own conclusion as to like how you feel about it, and you know, and go from there. Oh, and TikTok, because TikTok, you know, they always have, I mean, they're like on it. So on it right away with the political stuff. So yeah.
Thank you. Anyone else before we move on to the next question?
So outside of myself, I get most of the news from like just email briefings from like certain campaigns. I have to be honestly just you know, descriptive about that. But other than that, I would probably say Politico or Washington Post. I hate to, you know, of course New York Times as well, but I only trust political news from like specific sources. So there's even something called like The Hill, right? And it's sometimes I find it a little biased, right? And it talks a lot about the Hill, like just Congress and members of Congress. So a lot of the times I still find political news still very biased, even if it's online journalism and editorial. So for me, it's a lot of, also ABC News as well. Of course, like your NBC, ABC and stuff like that, but it's usually for the most part, like if it's a hard hitting, you know, thing that's going on, I will pick the Washington Post article over, honestly, maybe the New York Times article sometimes, right? Because yeah, if it's something that's happening in Congress, like it just varies a lot, but it's something that I'm not taking a favoritism because I like them or I like their whole their whole journalism standard. It's just New York Times is great for like really in-depth and really like great explainer articles, but when we want to really punch it home, Washington Post will do that for me for sure.
Thank you for sharing. So I want to get in, let's see. I want to go into my next question. Do you feel or believe that social media has positively influenced politics or the upcoming election?
I'll start. So I feel now that everyone's at home, right? You know, with quarantine and, you know, COVID, everyone's at home, meaning that our politicians are also at home. And I think that they've connected with social media more than I think any other political race ever has. But at the same time, when it becomes a question of like, is that good? Does it really influence like positively? I don't know. Right? We see so much misinformation on Facebook, right? I said it earlier. I have to triple check stuff because, you know, I'm not 100% sure. And sometimes people just say stuff to get a rise, or people say stuff for attention. Even politicians, they're humans too, right? And they have to get reelected and they have to do these things. So how do we continue to follow these people and trust what they say when we know that as human beings, we all make mistakes? Right? And we all say things sometimes that may not be 100% true, but we go with it and you just say it with confidence and hope you can move past it, right? And so I'm excited to see that, like with TikTok, right? These kids, they shut down that entire rally, right? They were so passionate and they were so behind this idea and they went with it, right? My generation, you know, I graduated high school in 2013. I don't think we would have done something like that. I'm going to be honest. Right? But they see this and they can expose each other to these things. And my little sisters, they talk about politics more than I think I ever have. And that's made me want to become more engaged and me become more informed in what's happening around me because they see it. Right? And so, and that idea, like politics has positively, on social media, has positively influenced a more involved and a more educated demographic of human beings. Right? We're not just voting blindly for someone. We're following them. We're seeing what they're doing. We're following their tweets. We're looking at their Instas. We're doing all this stuff to see a human being, right? And I think that in its own capacity is such a positive and I think enlightening way to view politics as a whole. It's very transparent, and I think that's very cool.
Thanks for sharing, Dominique. Anyone else?
I'm sorry, go ahead. No, I was just gonna say that I think that, like, you're right. I think that social media has had a positive influence on more young people getting involved and making their voices heard and connecting with like-minded individuals. Like, hey, we align in these things, and you know, these are things that we fully agree on. So it's created this whole new movement, this like revolution. I also think that it has had some negative impacts because there's so much misinformation and there are a lot of people who don't take the time to vet. There are a lot of people who just read the headline and make assumptions based off that headline alone. So you have that happen, and they're basing their opinions, what they're going to do, their actions based off of a headline with no additional information. So that part is negative, but I do think that as far as like getting our young people engaged and getting them involved and wanting to act and like be proactive and do things to actually help change this world for the betterment of themselves, it's been completely great for that.
I think something that is so awesome about the younger students too, like the students that I helped recruit that are in Dom's sister's grade, they don't believe the headlines. They need to like double and triple check things, you know, like Dom was saying, whereas a lot of the older generations will read that truly and be like, well, that says it. So I think, you know, it's for the generations that don't believe anything and look for extra proof and look for, you know, multiple articles on one topic that are, you know, I have a lot of younger friends that if they see something, they look for an article that's right-leaning, left-leaning, and moderate, and then they go from there. If you are a person that doesn't do that, or if you're a person that just sees that headline on Facebook and doesn't read the article, I think that it is harming those generations. I've seen a lot of my family go to a very extreme side because of those articles that are posted online. But I also, you know, am seeing a lot of change that I'm very proud of in my younger cousins. So I think it is doing something beneficial because it's an outlet that is auditory in a lot of ways. Like if they're getting their information from TikTok, they see it's auditory and it's visual instead of reading an article, because a lot of kids don't want to do that right now. But also it's really harmful because you can make a post, it could be true or false, and you post it in 15 seconds and it doesn't matter. You don't even have to fact check. So yeah, I see both sides very heavily.
That's awesome. Thanks, Theresa.
So I'm a little biased because I want to continue the work that I do and keep a job for a long time. So I think social media has done great wonders for politics. On a serious note, there has been a great way that in terms of how we're able to connect with people, whether it is like through ads, through organic reach, or whatever it may be. There is just something that should be said about how we've been able to include people that have felt marginalized or outsourced in terms of just being available, and how we, in a sense, we still idolize politicians, but in a sense, like we're bringing that down to where we are on their, Instagram and Twitter pages and just not harassing them, but definitely asking them the real questions in terms of, how are you going to do this? Or what about this? Or what about that? And I think that's very important. And yeah, I think that's very important. I would agree with Theresa in terms of, and agree with all of you guys saying that if you don't actually see both sides of something, then you're just going to be on an extreme of one side. And so that means always making sure that you have just a variety of news sources. But it also means just talking to people outside of what you read. So I know for sure, and for one big thing is the whole CHOP zone in Seattle. And people were just like, oh my God, are you sick? Are you dying? Are you know what I'm saying? Like we lived, managed, and worked. I actually didn't go to CHOP until like way after the fact, just because I was just bogged down with work anyways. And it was 20 minutes away from my apartment. But I didn't go because I knew who was there, had it taken care of, and had things under control, right? I knew that it wasn't a big, like it wasn't a disaster in terms of what the GOP media like discussed. And I will say that just to say there's a lot of misinformation, deep fake videos in terms of how people are just changing up the words. Like changing up the words to videos and then saying like, oh, I didn't change up the words. And then when you put the videos side by side and then they're like, oh, well, okay, whatever. Like we had an actual member of Congress from Louisiana post a deepfake video and then just throw it, just hope people get over it, in like a week or so. And they did. Like no one's making a big point of it. But that is like the real huge deal here, like misinformation and disinformation and deepfake videos and bots. We can go on and on and on. With all the good, we got more bad, right? I'm constantly going through my social media feeds for the accounts that I manage to make sure that we're not getting like any threats, we're not getting like any harassing messages, but to also check and see like what are the bots up to these days. Mm-hmm. Election security is very important, and election security is tampered with when we don't pay attention to things that are just simply happening in our Twitter accounts. And I hate to, make people paranoid or give them that extreme, but it's really that extreme, right? So if there's anything else you guys want to know about how, or if I can learn anything from how you guys are seeing digital comms work or digital communications for politics, that would be like very helpful, right? Because one thing that I also try to do is not have that fine line between politics and everyday life and how people see things. One thing that I try to do is make sure that people know that we know what's going on. I'm not going to sit up here and post about like a candidate that's running if I know that parts of our state is on fire, right? Like that's very important. So I make sure that, and I'm not going to boost up the re-election of the governor and adjacent to the fires, right? Say like re-elect the governor because we want to fight climate change, but I will say that, of course, but I will not say that when it's reported that 6 people have died in a fire, right? Like we can't be out of touch, but we are definitely trying to make sure we know what's going on, and that you all know that we are open to however you want to feel, and suggestions that you all have for what we should be sharing with the public.
Thanks so much, KERRI. That's really awesome. Anyone else before we move on to our next question?
I just wanted to add one last thing that about like the older versus the like the boomers versus the millennials, I think, or Gen Z, I don't know. Anyway, like when I do see, like, for example, someone maybe from my generation or older who posts an inaccurate article, I will totally see like the younger people like end those comments with like links and like, nope, this is inaccurate, this has been debunked, this is why, and blah blah blah, just throwing out the information. So like, that's just great. And I love seeing that. They're like, bam, bam, bam. Like they say what they say, but they like back it up. They like bring the receipts. And I love that.
That's awesome. Go ahead, OFELIA.
Okay. I think social media has had its positive, as everyone has stated, it's had its positive and negative impacts, definitely, for sure. Definitely positive with the younger generation. Like, I feel really positive that future generations are going to make a very big difference in this world, because they are so in tune with what's going on in our world, and how it's important to get out and vote, because we see when we don't vote what happens. And that, I just love that for social media platforms, that's where majority of young people are on, is social media. So I mean, makes sense for it to be all over, and we just learned so much information, and I just love that for future generations. The negative impacts, I hate that Kanye West decided to run all of a sudden, and that the people that are not really educated on that, they're all for him. And I mean, I don't hate him and I don't love him, but I mean, I definitely don't want him as president, because I don't know what he knows about politics. So I would say that's one of the biggest negative impacts that there has been on social media for the upcoming election. But other than that, I really do love that social media has made it so much easier for people to have so much information at the click of an app. Like, you just click on the app and you have so much information on anything, honestly. And I just love that for generations to come.
That's awesome. Thanks so much for sharing. My next question has to do with political advertising and just political content. Like, in terms of like advertising, how often do you encounter some type of political ad on a social platform? And if you do, what are some of the things you've seen, and how do they appear on the app?
Well, I'll start. I made the mistake of signing up for one of the different parties, and I was like, yeah, I would totally want to get texts from you guys. That would be so great. And I swear, they literally text me like 500 times in a week. I was like, I can't do this anymore. And I had to like unsubscribe. And I was like, well, me unsubscribing isn't that I don't care. It's like, this is too much, right? And even if you go like on Facebook, you know, I love my FB. But when you go on there, it's like, man, sometimes I just want to see a cat video, you know? It's just like, you get bombarded with it, especially as we're getting closer and closer and closer. And, you know, I follow like different, you know, politicians and different people who are trying to go in the office. And I'm like, okay, what are you about? But it's like becoming less and less about, you know, what I believe in, and just, you know, just things, right? And I'm like, well, you know, it's not an ad, but everything's an ad, you know? Like, you're not just doing something for the fun of it. You're doing something because you want something from us, or you want us to see you a certain way. And it's like, where do I get to see you as a future politician when you're telling me what you believe in, what you're going to do for our country and things like that? But I'm seeing all this like random stuff that means nothing to me. And it's very hard to, you know, kind of distinguish where we are and what's an ad and what's a ploy and what's just truth, you know? I don't know if that makes sense, but that's what I see a lot of.
Thanks, Dom.
Something I will say that is very interesting that KERRI might be able to attest to is I work for a college and I see how expensive it is to run those ads, which blows my mind because I was so naive. I'd be like, hey, you know, I recruit in Chicago and I want this ad to run for all my students that could potentially be interested in Chicago. And they'd say, Theresa, so that's every student in between the ages of 14 and 18 in the Chicagoland area. That's who you want. And I was like, yeah, that's awesome. And the head of the ad company that we were using at the time, he was like, that could easily by itself be in thousands of dollars. And I was like, okay, never mind. So it's so crazy because that's where my head is now. If I keep getting an ad from the same person, I'm like, how much money did you spend to target me? Like that's, you know, I mean, I personally have never seen a Facebook ad that I'm like, ah, yes, I love this ad about this politician. Oh my gosh. But, you know, now my head is like, my Lord, how much money did you spend on marketing that you could have spent on something else? And, you know, to me, it's such a waste because I don't think that marketing has gotten anyone anywhere. But KERRI might have something different.
Thanks for sharing, Theresa. I really appreciate it.
Well, it's gotten me a job, Theresa.
I know. That's why I said I'd love to hear from you because my final statement was very cut and dry.
It was very cut. No, so that's what I was laughing in the middle of everything because yeah, your desire to market to every kid desiring to go to Spring Hill in Chicago, that is probably closer to 10,000 than the lower thousand. Depending on how long you want to target it for, all of that other it's just a lot of technical stuff, right? So yeah, that is very interesting. Hold on, let me reread the question really quickly. Can you just tell it? Oh, I see it. Oh, in terms of advertising.
I can say it out loud again.
Oh, okay. Actually, so I see a lot of email advertisements in terms of the political campaigns that I've signed up for before. I'm on like certain email lists, and I get a lot of texts from the DNC. And I know you may not like it, Dom, but I like it sometimes. Because sometimes the texts are like really great reminders. Sometimes the text they have cool images in the text. So I'm not too mad about them texting me all the time. Also, it's a good way for me to see like how people are communicating, and I can see it right at the palm of my hand. So I know for sure it's different for me than anyone else. But I do want to say I would love to hear about how you guys are seeing advertisements right now, because Facebook has put a restriction on their ads, on political ads actually. It started I think in June 2020. So I would love to see and to hear from you all about how you are seeing ads, because for example, Trump spends a lot of money on advertisements, right? I never see them on my feed. If you go into Facebook, there's like this ad studio channel. I forget exactly what we call it, but there's this ad channel where you can just type in a user's name, and you can, of course, use other features to see everything else, but you can see how much money they've been spending on ads. You can see how well these ads are doing, you know, how long these ads have been out there. And it's a good way to see what Trump ads are saying when we don't actually get them, right? Because if you're doing the things that you are doing, whether you are on the Republican side or the Democratic side or somewhere in the middle, if you are doing a lot of different, if you're on the extreme side of liberal and conservatism, you're only going to see one person, right? And so it's really good to go ahead and look at those ads and see what it's really like and see what's happening. I still get ads on Instagram sometimes, but everyone is, you know, crossed out political ads for 2020. So if you guys have actually seen ads, I would love to know, other than like TV ads. I've seen Joe Biden and Trump TV ads during like the new NFL season. But that is about it. I would love to hear if Sydney doesn't mind.
I know for
Oh, go ahead. Do you want to go, Theresa?
I was just gonna say, like, I was just on Snapchat yesterday, and there was an ad that came up, asking me if I was registered to vote, and I just thought like that was a unique ad, and you're like, you know, if I clicked it, it led me to more information, like different ways to register to vote. So, very informative, I think, and just something that's like right at you as soon as you open the app, you know. So
that's a big deal though, that I'm trying to just make a point of, is that we can do a lot in terms of like voter engagement, encouraging people to vote, but we can't do like political ads for the most part, in terms of the presidential candidates can do it, but you can't really run you know, local level candidate ads, right? So if there's women that are running in local races, you know, how are they getting their message out? I think that's just how I'm thinking about everything too.
I have seen a few Trump ads still on Facebook. I've seen quite a few. And then I'm still getting text messages. I'm getting lots and lots of text messages. I'm getting text messages to my work phone, which I have never signed anything up for. I got my work phone about 6 months ago, so I don't know if it was someone that had the number before. But yeah, I have not seen, I don't think I've seen a Biden ad in a hot minute, but I've seen a lot of Trump ads still.
Yeah, and like the text messages I was getting, it's like, okay, this, like, Trump is like so many, he spent this much money on ads. What can you donate? And I'm like, oh my goodness, like, wait, I'm a teacher. I'm poor. Like, please stop. I'm a teacher. You know, I'm like, I want to give you all the monies, but I don't have all the monies to give you, you know? And so I get a lot of email ads as well. And then I get stuff that other people share, of course. And, you know, that's also like my friend base and things like that. But I see both sides. You know, I'm in Mobile, Alabama. I'm in the dirty South, baby. So I see all kinds of stuff, right? And so that's just kind of like, I see both ends of everything. And I think that's so crazy about social media is like my friends, and it's like, if I was like, I'm not going to be friends with anybody who believes any way other than me, I'm in Mobile, I would have no friends, you know? And so like, that's been so crazy for me. And it's like exposed me to so many different like views of the world, right? One of my very best friends views very differently about almost literally everything than me. But I was like, I cannot imagine living life without you, right? You bring so much joy to my life. And so like the things that she posts and all that, like, it's like, wow, like you see this and you believe this, but I see this and believe this, you know, but it's like our exposure, right? And how we were raised and like what our parents showed us and what they made us believe too. And then like what our friends believed once we became old enough to believe for ourselves, what we thought was good and what would influence us. So it's just like so crazy. And I think that's why like I'm so excited that y'all picked social media for this one, because who you hang out with and who you're friends with on social media completely, you see so much from so many people, and it's just, it's wild. And KERRI, to answer your question, that's how I saw 90% of the ads that I've seen, is because people have shared like videos, YouTube videos and things on social media, and you just end up watching them. You don't know how you got there, but you're there, right? So that's kind of where I was.
Thanks, Dom.
Yeah. I was just gonna say, like, I had signed up for that. Like, for example, I signed up for like the Tulsa rally, but then I remember that I was in Rochester and couldn't go. So I keep getting like 1,020,000 emails and texts from that. And I mean, I keep it because it's interesting to see like the wording and like the verbiage that he uses, or that his campaign really uses, to try to like get people to support it. And so I like to keep the emails just so I can see like what's being put out there, like directly from his camp, just to kind of know like this is the information or the misinformation that is being shared, so that you just have that information at your disposal and you can kind of just vet it yourself. But I get like, I get emails from like the Democratic Party, but like I want to say like a 7-to-1 compared to like the Trump emails that I get. It's crazy.
Thanks, Sharkisha. Anyone else before we move on to our next question?
I get most of my election news through Instagram or Snapchat, like you had said. Like, I'll just be clicking through stories and stuff, and then it'll just pop up, like, are you registered to vote? And who do you want to be in office? And I would be honest, like, it's really tough election this time, because we don't really have that great of candidates. At least that's my opinion. Makes it really tough to want to vote, but I know I have to, because otherwise I'm not doing myself or anyone a favor if I do not vote. It's really, really hard to just want to vote for either candidate, because of I know so much on both of them, and I can't really, but I know who I will vote for. But other than that, I haven't really seen any like actual like ads for Biden or Trump. On social media, it's usually on the TV that I'll see that on. It's never really on social medias. It's just really like, are you registered to vote, and are you gonna vote this upcoming election? Just stuff like that.
Thanks for sharing, Ophelia. And we actually have an anonymous question from one of our guests that are joining us right now. It says, NPR has reported that since Russia's expansive influence operation during the 2016 election, Americans' usage of social media has only increased, and drastically so, as a result of the pandemic. Does this scare you?
So this is kind of an answer to this question, but also in the same time, I think this is a perfect time to have this conversation, because over this weekend, if you don't have TikTok downloaded to your phone, you won't be able to. So, I think it does scare me to an extent, but also, if you believe in your government and you believe that they're trying to keep us safe, then there's not as much to be as scared of as we think. If you truly believe that what's going on, we're hearing about it, but that doesn't mean the government didn't already know. So it's just, you have to, there's so much that we don't know that we find out later that the government could be like, well, yeah. So, it scares me, but at the same time, with the election being so close, I think we're going to see a lot of changes soon, hopefully, fingers crossed. So yes, it scares me, but not as much as others. That's how I'll say it.
Thanks.
Yeah, I'm married to I'll call him a conspiracy theorist, right? And all of his friends. So his friends are like, oh yeah, COVID will disappear when the election's over. That's how they think, right? So when anything happens, they're like, oh, what are they really hiding from us? Like, oh, this thing is happening right now. What's really going on? And it's like, well, like if you start thinking the way they think, and you're like, I'm not to their extremes, but it's like, well, wait. So like maybe like all this stuff and all this advertising and all this kind of stuff that we're being bombarded with, what's the agenda? And so if you start thinking of it that way, and then you learn, like after the 2016 election, Russia had a lot of influence on what happened, and nothing came of that, right? So it's like, okay, that happened, but now we all know. And it was like, okay, let's move on to something else, right? So it's like the idea that nothing is truly handled, but it, and you have this knowledge in the back of your brain. And like Theresa said, you want to wish for the best for your country and that they want the best for everyone. But then it becomes like, well, we know that they know this, and they really haven't done anything on a public sphere, right? On a public platform to make us feel like they've taken this information and done something with it, right? And so that's what makes me really nervous about this upcoming election, because money talks, right? And like I was talking about earlier, I'm getting all these texts about donations. I'm saying they're needing money for a reason, right? They can't compete with some outside force possibly that's influencing something else. So how do they compete? They ask for more donations, right? So it's just like, we know how the world operates now that we're getting older and we're not as naive. And it's hard to think like, yeah, everything's fine. They're not going to let this happen ever again, but who knows what happens behind closed doors, And so that's something that we have to kind of think about and be, I think, to a point, skeptical of, kind of like my husband and his little conspiracy theory friends. But just something, I think about sometimes, like, what are we missing,
Mm-hmm.
So.
Thanks, Dom.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that. Like, there's so many things that are happening right now that we never would have thought would have come to fruition or would have been given a pass. And it's happened. And we would think like, okay, this is a checkpoint. This is something where someone is going to say this is not okay and this needs to change. And that hasn't happened. So, and there's been plenty of opportunities. So it is kind of scary going into this new election, knowing that there are a lot of like changes that are, you know, like things could happen with interference and like potentially that people in the places to, in the positions to be that could do something about it could potentially just kind of turn the blind side to it. So it is a possibility that something like that could happen. So it is kind of scary. So this is kind of like the election where like you really, really, really need to vote because there needs to be like unquestionable numbers. Because if there's the chance of even the slightest, like basically I think the last election there was like maybe like a 3 million people difference. If that were to happen this time, they could potentially become something where we could have someone contesting that or refusing to leave office, or there are a lot of things that could happen. So yeah, it's pretty scary.
Thanks, Sharkisha. Anyone else? So we actually have another anonymous question from one of our viewers, and that brings it back to what OFELIA mentioned earlier. So the question asks, does the apathy around this particular election scare you? To OFELIA's point earlier, a lot of people don't have confidence in either candidate. How do you think this can be addressed?
So I think that, I mean, I completely understand why there's a lack of confidence in both candidates. It's like, it makes sense. And it makes sense. It's terrible that we started with, I don't even know how many candidates, and we still kind of end up with, at least in my opinion, the lesser of two evils again, where you're just kind of like, there was like this TikTok video where they were saying how, I guess, it was like a post about Biden having a conversation with someone. And he was saying, oh yeah, like when police shoot, why do they shoot to kill? Why don't they shoot in the leg? And they were like, this is like leg 2020, where we're just kind of like, let's just get someone in office who can kind of just, you know, we can work with them to move forward. Just kind of like putting a Band-Aid on a bullet wound and then maybe moving forward and trying to see what we can do from there. But just kind of like, it's kind of proactive just to kind of step in and do something. But it is kind of scary because there are a lot of people who feel like, you know, they feel morally sound that they don't feel like they could support either candidate, like they can't live with that. And that's their right to do that. You know, they have the choice to like not choose, but it's scary because them not choosing could really be like potentially dangerous maybe for a large number of people. So it's kind of scary, you know, to think about that. Like young people, for example, they have their convictions, and when they have their convictions, like they cannot be swayed. So it's kind of scary.
Thanks for sharing. Anyone else would like to comment?
Going back to what Sharkisha said with the young people, and when they have their convictions, they cannot be swayed. I would 100% agree with that, because I definitely saw that when Kanye West tweeted that he was running for president, and lots of young people were like, yep, that's who I'm voting for. I can't pick Trump or Biden. We're going to go for Kanye. And that brings a whole other problem, because now they're trying to write him in, and that just creates a bigger problem. And it blows my mind that, I mean, this is the first election I'm allowed to vote in, so I have like the worst candidates possible, but I am going to try my best to see which one has the better I want to see which one I agree with their viewpoints more. Mm-hmm. And I most definitely am swaying more towards Biden, because I don't agree with half the things that Trump has done during his presidential as he's been president. I don't agree with many things he's done, and I don't really think he's done enough to prove that he can serve another term. But also with Biden, we do have a lot of problems there, because most people that are voting for him are voting because he was vice president of Obama. And that's just what they're running with. They're not actually like seeing like, is he an actual candidate that we want? And I think just with that alone, it is really, it's really disheartening to know that I feel like we don't have the like perfect candidate, but we also have to vote, because if we don't, then that just creates a bigger problem. And yeah.
Thanks for sharing. Anyone else would like to share? Go ahead, KERRI.
So I think you guys are, I appreciate you guys for sharing that opinion, because that's something that we hear a lot. I actually recently heard a story on NPR where it was talking about undecided voters and like voters that have decided. And it was this young woman still in high school, and she was out helping her community, and she was doing all that she could to help her community, but she said, yeah, I'm still not going to vote. And that was just so disheartening to me, because I completely understand if you do anything that you want in any other way possible, right? I just don't understand just not practicing your right to vote, right? And especially someone that wants to see change. Like if you legitimately want to see change and you are like, oh, I'm just going to work with grassroots organizations. Well, who do you think is spearheading and funding those grassroots organizations? I don't always like getting into the technical stuff, but I was a particular way of just being a true social justice advocate between high school and college. And I decided to get into politics after college, right? And so for me, it was really understanding the dynamics of everything, that if you really want to get what you want to get, you have to work within the system that's already been built and somehow do whatever you have to do. If you want to dismantle it, you figure out how to do that within it though, because we have to somehow bring things together to make them better. And that's completely my opinion. That's not, I understand if no one views that the same. But that is just my opinion in terms of we can do stuff within the system that's already been built. No, the system was not built to protect everyone, right? We know that. But if we go in knowing that, then we move differently than the people that went in not realizing that. And I think that's the difference. And I think for me, there was a campaign with a couple of women running. Mm-hmm. There was a campaign with a Black woman, but she's still there. And then when it got to, sorry, hold on one second.
Yes, take that water break.
Lubricate. No, I'm joking. If you know, you know. No, but so when it got to when others had dropped out and it was time to vote in the primary and we still had women on the ballot, like it was very important to me to highlight, and well, not highlight, but like make my distinction and make it known that like if I see a woman on this ballot, like I'm going to support her. And I knew what was happening after the fact, right? If I can be frank with you, I knew what was happening after the fact, but I wanted to support those women for sure. And more than anything, the thing that really helped me most recently with saying like, I am going to do this and not just saying, we have to do this, is that Anita Hill actually came out in support of Biden. And I think that I know that, I've been doing more work to support Biden and like him as the presidential candidate because I work for Democrats. But it was that for me to be able to part with myself. And I think oftentimes like every decision that I make, how am I going to tell this to my future daughter, right? Like, how am I going to say to her, I voted for Joe Biden, love, and not Elizabeth Warren. And so if she hears a story about Anita Hill and she hears a story about other women and how we rallied together because we had to do one thing, and that was defeat Donald Trump. that, I'm sorry. Okay, so I know that is full disclosure. Like, I know we're not supposed to be saying these in descriptive terms, but I do work for Democrats, so it's basically me a part of my work. But I'm not saying everyone should agree with that, but that is what I have to do in my everyday work, right? Bringing people, because one thing that I will say, and I will end this here, is that we have a major like progressive Democrats versus moderate Democrats disagreements all the time. And so we want to make sure that, yes, we can come together and have these arguments, and we can have these discussions, and we can have this civil discourse, but we need to understand that the greater good is just advancing the people. And so that's why I appreciate THERESA bringing up like AOC in the conversations, and you, OFELIA, bringing up like you're not like just jumping for joy to vote for Biden, because we do need to understand that we are all somewhere in this middle. Like there are people that are on the end, right? And those people are like our older parents, probably. But we are all somewhere in this middle. So yeah.
Thanks, KERRI, for sharing. I really appreciate that. Anyone else before we move on to our next question? Okay, so what I want to bring it back to social media, but I want to talk about, political discourse on social media and just having political debates on social media. And as we get closer to the upcoming election, I think it's like 44 days now, apparently, we're getting down to the wire. And I want to know if there's ever been a recent time where you have engaged with political discourse on social media with another user. Like, what was the tone of the debate? Was anything resolved? Or can you just fill us in on how that went? Yeah, go ahead, THERESA.
I would love to start this. I have two examples that I'm gonna go on. One was with a family member that it's on Facebook. I'll say it like that. One was with a family member on Facebook. They posted just talking about, I live in Chicago. My dad is a retired cop. I was raised by cops, but I still see what's so wrong with, the police department in that system. I think people come to me for advice because I see, because being raised that way, I see in a different way why everything is so wrong. So my family member posted about the police department, and then posted about the Republican endorsement of the police department. And I just brought up, in a very polite way, I just said, like, I'd love to have a conversation with you via Messenger, just to talk, because we're family. I don't know how Thanksgiving is going to work because of COVID and the pandemic, so I probably realistically won't be able to have that fight in person. So I said, I'd love to talk to you via Messenger. No hard feelings. I just want to hear what's going on. And they were not having it, wanted to say, like, if you want to talk to me, you can talk to me in public. We can talk about it in the comments. And I said, you know what, I'm going to take a step back. It's not worth it. You can't choose your family. Well, you can't choose your biological family. So I said, I'm going to take a step back. It's not worth it. And then I go to Instagram, and a girl had started just a political debate, because I post very often on my story. And she just wanted to talk, and it was phenomenal. And now we've been talking for probably about 6 or 7 days, and we are kind of like what Dom was saying, we are on two very different spectrums, but it's been the best conversation, and it's been really healthy, and we are respectful of each other, and we're respectful of the conversation. And even with stuff that we don't agree with, we'll say, like, you know what, let's take a second, let's sleep on it, and let's talk again tomorrow. And it's been great, but it's such a shame that could happen with someone that, I went to college with, and it can't happen with a family member. Like that to me is the thing that hurts, because I think a lot of our older family members don't see us as educated in a lot of ways. So they don't want to have that conversation, because they say, like, well, you're young. And I mean, I couldn't tell you how many people that are younger than me are more educated than I am. So, you know, it blows my mind that you're not willing to have a conversation like that with someone in your family that you love unconditionally, but some girl that I went to college with, I can have that conversation with. So, yeah, it's very important to me, so.
That was awesome. Thanks, Theresa, for that. And I know, Dom, you wanted to go next, so I'm gonna let you go.
Yeah, so I'm a teacher. So I don't know how COVID became so political, but it did, right? And so I posted about like, hey, like everyone loved teachers when it was like, yeah, you're all doing so great with online learning, but now teachers are saying, hey, I think we should stay home. It's not safe. And it became like, oh, we pay your salaries. You're not doing your job. It became such this like thing. And it became like, how did you care at one moment and now you hate everything that we do? Because we have to also think about ourselves, right? And so I got into like a very long debate with like one of my best friends from high school's mom. And I was like, whoa, this is weird, right? It's like, how am I, like, I never saw you as this person. And I think that's so scary when it comes to like not agreeing with someone on Facebook. And I was like, I saw you as this like very liberated and very like, you know, like, oh, free thinking kind of person. But here you are aligning yourself with this ideology that is very conformist, right? And so that was something that was so strange to me. And if you know me, I post all the time about Black Lives Matter on my Facebook. That's literally my feed. That's just something that's so dear to my heart, especially as a woman of color, right? And so I've had to really look at a lot of people differently and see like how do you not understand, right? And I had to talk to someone about how they were calling the coronavirus like the Chinese virus, and how is that different than calling it the Spanish flu? And I was like, because a person of Chinese descent is telling you that it's offensive to them, but you're not educating yourself or taking the time to understand or use the empathy that you were taught as a child to say like, this is hurting this person that I'm Facebook friends with, that I've interacted with some point in my life and met this person. It was like, I want to know you a little bit more, and you don't care about what you're saying is making them feel, right? As a social worker, potential social worker, I graduate in December, like we're taught empathy, right? We're taught to love people and to see where they're coming from and meet them where they are. Right? So if you are telling someone that it's okay for it to be called the Spanish flu, but it's not okay for it to be called the Chinese virus, like that's problematic to me, right? So use your empathy and use your understanding that someone very eloquently and very maturely was like, please stop calling it this because it hurts my feelings and it makes me feel isolated. It makes me feel this way, right? As someone who took the time to send that Facebook friend request, you should listen to what they have to say. But that's the crazy thing about, you know, arguing with people on Facebook. They no longer see you as a friend or a person, they see you as the enemy, right? I became the enemy because I was, as a teacher with asthma, who is high risk, didn't want to go back into the classroom with high schoolers, love them to death, but ninth graders are still a little bit nasty, right? And thinking about my own health, right? How did I become the villain when I had to think about myself at the same time, right? And everything just became this like political battle, right? And like my husband's friends, right? COVID will disappear when the election's over, right? It becomes, even in that regard, it became a political thing, right? So how do we engage with people and not become political, even if it's about politics, right? What happens to moral values, right? That's not political. That's something that you were taught as a child, or something that you taught yourself because you never saw it, right? So these are things that I began to think about and I began to see as I, you know, like Theresa, I stopped arguing with people. I'm like, okay, you win. I'm like, oh, that's true. You know what? You win. Cool. I'm not going to waste my life arguing with you right now. Right. And that becomes such, I don't know if like I'm not doing the right thing anymore by not advocating for what I believe to be the truth. But at the end of the day, like I have to protect my own mental health. And I can't argue with everybody's mommy and daddy about how they view the world. Right. So I don't know if this is me posing a question for myself, but like, how do you go about arguing with people and protecting your own mental health because they don't see the world the way you do, or they're too ignorant or too ingrained in their own beliefs to view something differently? And I know when Trump got elected for the first time, you know, using the disclaimer right here, I was really upset, right? I said, I don't want someone who tells somebody that they can grab them by the pussy, excuse my language, right? And that was really hard for me. And I posted this thing for my little sisters, like, no one is allowed to touch you that way. And people from all different political beliefs as women, they're like, no, no one is. And they're like, I don't get involved in politics, but you posting this meant a lot to me, right? No one's allowed to touch anyone that way. And I want my sisters and my cousins and my nieces to know that that's true, right? So there's always a line, but sometimes people, they don't care enough to see beyond the lines and just be human, right? And I learned after that election that, like, even if they voted for that person, that doesn't demonize them. And I had to learn, like, not to, I don't know what the word is, not patronize someone, but to educate someone. And I learned very quickly that there's a difference, right? And I guess, like, how do you keep that balance and keep your sanity and keep understanding and keep advocating and fighting for what you believe in without becoming the patronizing figure, right? And that's such, like, a hard balance, especially on social media, because, I mean, words are typed in seconds, right? And if I'm mad and you've pissed me off, it's a wrap. You know, Dom goes from cute little Dom with a little ribbon in her hair to, like, oh no, this is the end, right? So it's like finding that balance continuously is very hard. And I know, KERRI, you deal with social media all the time. So I'm just, like, intrigued by how you continue to stay so balanced. Like, that's so hard to me. That's why I have to take breaks, and I just start posting random stuff when I go to Dirt Cheap because I just can't handle it. I love Dirt Cheap. Yes, that's my plug for Dirt Cheap. Go. But I don't know. Thanks for coming to my TED Talk. I don't know where I went with that, but sorry.
No, Dom, thank you for sharing. That was amazing. KERRI, I don't want to cut you off, but OFELIA did ask to go next, so I'm going to let her go, and then you can go.
All right. So, in regards to what Dominique was saying, I actually saw a post the other day, and it was saying, it had basically said that I am no longer arguing or fighting with people that clearly cannot see the problem with like police brutality and the elections and stuff like that. You're not, it said, like, I'm not going to argue with them because they've had enough time to get the facts and information for themselves and educate themselves on why what's going on in our country right now is so wrong. And that made me, like, that post made me happy because that is so true. Like, we shouldn't have to sit here on social media platforms arguing with grown people that can differentiate what's wrong and what's good, you know? And I think that's a problem, like, with the very older generation, like boomers, I would say, that they're just more like they will see certain things on social media and they'll just go running with it. They won't check it or nothing, but they'll talk down on younger generations saying that we're dumb and that we're not educated. But I also feel like that's just ingrained in them, that, like, that's what they were taught. Like, your elders are supposed to be respected and you're just supposed to listen to what they have to say all the time. And I honestly believe that I have, like, the perfect social media platforms because I do not have a single person that disagrees with my opinions on there. It's majority of people that I do have on my social media accounts, they're all for what I believe. So I've never had to argue with a person on Facebook or Twitter or any of that sort about my opinions, which I'm really grateful for because I know I would probably pop off on them. But I mean, it's just kind of hard not to, because it's just kind of like, why can't you see what's wrong with the picture? Like, why can't you see the bigger picture? But I mean, people are stuck in their ways, and I mean, it's not my job, your job, anybody's job to educate them because they could do it themselves. So yeah.
Thanks so much for sharing, OFELIA. Anyone else want to comment before the next question? Yes, Sharkisha.
Yeah, I actually had I've had quite a few, like, engagements with people on social media in regards to, like, this kind of thing. For one particular example I had was with a friend of mine who, she made a post, and her post was stating, why is it that if you say you're a Trump supporter, or when people say they're a Trump supporter, other people automatically assume you're racist? You know, that was the post. And my response to that was, oh no, there were a lot of comments in the thread saying, oh, you know, people think Republicans are racist, blah, blah, blah. And I go, I don't think all Republicans are racist. I do think, however, that if you're a Trump supporter, if you're not a racist, you've decided it wasn't a deal breaker. And she said, well, you know, why is that? I said, well, he ran his platform on it. His entire he didn't hide it. It wasn't like he got into office and did a 360 and you are all surprised by the decisions he made. He went off the bat saying all Mexicans are evil, essentially. You know, we should ban Muslims, not allow them into our country. He put out a fake commercial with like a clip from like World War Z about the zombies coming across the wall and associated that with Mexicans. The caravan of refugees. I'm like, he put into laws to make it like, he purposely did something where it would be really hard for anyone to come here and seek asylum in this country. That was intentional. He knew what he was doing. And then you get the straw man response, oh, Obama separated kids too. No, there was a completely different situation where a child came across the border without a legal guardian. They needed to confirm that this person had the, permission to be coming into the country with this child. Yeah, they were separated for a period of maybe 72 hours before a legal guardian could be found either in the states or out of the states. But people don't know that. There was no law in place that if you come here seeking asylum, which is not illegal, that your child will be taken from you and placed in a cage and you will be sent back, or you would be threatened that if you do not leave, you will lose your child. That is a problem. That's problematic. It's problematic to assume that because you don't believe religiously the same way I do, that you don't have a voice, or you shouldn't have a voice, or you should be persecuted. That's problematic. It's problematic to assume that because I love differently, if I'm transgender, that means that I can't properly serve this country if I wanted to go to war and fight for the country I believe in. And you say, no, because you're transgender, you're problematic. And that's problematic. And you saw all these things that he said and that he did, and his viewpoints on women, his viewpoints on minorities, his viewpoints on people of color, and you decided that whatever he was offering you was more important to those people that would be harmed by the laws and the actions that he would put in place. So you decided, yeah, racism isn't a deal breaker, xenophobia isn't a deal breaker, like transphobia, all those things weren't a deal breaker for you. So that is problematic. You said, these are things that are going to impact other people, but it won't impact me. So I'm okay with that. So yeah, that's why a lot of people have a lot of issues, at least in my opinion, with people who support Trump. I get it. You feel like he's doing so many great things for you, but how many people are harmed while that's happening? Yeah.
That was so awesome. Thank you so much for sharing, Sharkisha. I really appreciate it. Anyone else before we move on to our next question? Alrighty, let's transition. Okay, so I thought that I wanted to bring this up. So this is a study done by the Pew Research Center. Now, this is a study that comes from 2018, but I think it's really timely and relevant. And so I'll break it down for you and then ask the question. So the Pew Research Center did a survey about fact versus opinion news statements on social media. And so they had a group of US adults who participated, and all of them had to look at 10 news statements, and they had to categorize them as either fact or opinion. So it was broken up into fact had 5 statements, opinion had 5 statements, and they had to, put them in the right category. And so the results. The study found that younger Americans are better than older Americans at telling factual news statements from opinions. So it was about a third of 18 to 40-year-olds correctly identified all 5 of the factual statements compared to ages 50 or older. And then the same for opinions. For 18 to 49-year-olds, 44% correctly identified all 5 opinion statements compared to 26% among age 50 and older. So when looking at the statements like individually, younger adults were not only able to correctly identify these statements are fact or opinion, but they could do so also regardless of the ideological appeal of the statements. And I thought this was really interesting. So I just wanted to get your thoughts on these findings and what they might mean. And I think, Theresa, you mentioned earlier, and I just wanted to bring it up again because I thought that was really monumental what you said about how younger Americans, they have all these news sources that they look to verify the information that they receive. So.
Like, honestly, I'm not surprised. I think older generations definitely take things at face value more than our generation does. And I think I know as a teacher, I teach my kids to critically think. I said, you may not pass this class, but I promise you're going to become a better critical thinker, and you're going to be able to look at stuff and evaluate it and decide for yourself if it's good, if it's bad, or if it's true, right? I said, your grade doesn't really reflect what you've really learned in this classroom, right? And I feel like that's something that older generations don't necessarily have as much of, right? They take things like, oh, this is what they said, that must be true, right? And that goes kind of, you know, if we even go back to like Nixon, and then, man, I cannot remember his name, but the president after Nixon, they're like, we're going to tell you the truth, right? And there's such like, okay, we're going to just believe what people give us, right? Why would people be dishonest? Why would people lie? Why would you lie about that? You know, and then it's that face value kind of naivety that comes with being older. You know, we hear all the time about the scams that happen to, like, you know, elderly people, and they get those messages, those emails from people from Africa, like, your nephew has been kidnapped. We need $5 million, right? And they're like, oh my gosh, I have to go give them $5 million. I'm like, but why? You're not gonna ask any questions? Where is he in prison? Why is he there? What did he do? You know? And so, like, our generation is like, that seems real skeptical to us. Let's play along. You know, we'll just go with it a little bit more than I think older generations do. Mm-hmm. And I think it's because we know that there's so many things out there that are meant to dissuade us, right? And I you know, being an educator, I test that to the education system, right? We're teaching them to be free thinkers, which was not something that in older generations that they were taught to do. They weren't taught to be free thinkers. They were taught to fit in their little boxes, sit in their desks, become the best of the best, and move on, right? And we still have, you know, some residuals of that, but we're teaching them to think, right? To beat the bourgeoisie, to beat that ideology that they have to follow the norm. We teach them to be your own person, which was not something that kind of independence wasn't valued, I think, in later generations as they are today.
Thanks for sharing, Dom. Anyone else want to share?
Yeah, to add to that, I think a lot of it too is that young people, they have more access to information. They're like online, they're researching, they're vetting, they have multiple social media platforms. And I think the older generation isn't as adept with that. They may like maybe just watch Fox News or just watch MSNBC, whether it's right leaning or left leaning. They're getting that biased information and they're not doing their own vetting. Or they're seeing, if they are on Facebook, for example, they're seeing maybe a triggering article and, you know, they're not questioning it. They maybe don't even know how to vet it to see if the information is accurate or not. So I think that's part of the problem. Whereas someone who's younger is going to be like, this seems either I want more information because it just seems too crazy to be true, or, you know, like I just need to know more about what's happening. So they kind of vet it themselves and do their own independent research and like back up the sources to see if this is actually true information, if it's inaccurate information, if it's like biased information, you know, or like partially true. So I think that's a huge part of it as well.
Thanks, SHARKISHA. And so we actually have another question from another viewer. And this comes from our lovely editor-in-chief, Michelle. And she says, some of you say older generations take things at face value. I don't, and many I know don't. What factors do you think may play in older people's viewpoints besides age?
That's a good question. OFELIA, do you want to take it first?
Yes, please. I would, to answer that question, I don't think it's like, I know I'm not trying to give older people a bad rep, but it's also a majority of what I see is that older people have that reputation of not fact checking everything. Like I said, they'll just run with whatever information they get off of Facebook or whatever. And I don't think it all older people are like that. Like Michelle, like I'm sure she has that in her mind that she wants to be in the know of now, and she wants to change her mindset of how she views things. You know, she's more open-minded than other older people are, you know? And I feel like there's kind of like an injustice for them because they are not in the so in tune or in the loop with social media, and they're not really so they don't know that there could be fake posts and fake news and all that. They just think that what's posted is the truth, and I feel like that's just the injustice, that there's injustice served to them when they don't know these things about social media. But for us younger people, we definitely know that someone will be like, oh, Trump is like letting immigrants in, like we're gonna be like, what? But then older people, they could see that and they're gonna be like, oh my gosh, he's doing it, you know? And I don't know, it just goes on, like, this is more for like the generations that are in tune with social media, and we know about fake news.
Thanks for sharing, Ophelia.
Yes, Ophelia, and I didn't mean to stereotype, older generations, but I think of like my grandma, and she'll be like, I'll post something and it'll be like me and my husband. She's like, oh, I remember when I was in love once. And I'm like, Grandma, what are you talking about? And she's like, does like stuff like that, or I'll post something and she's like, yeah, when I was younger, it wasn't like this. And I'm like, well, Grandma, this is not how it is now. Like, what do you want to say, And I try to like get her to like express herself a little bit more. And maybe it's not that they take things at face value. It's just like, maybe you get to the point in your life and you're like, you know what, it is what it is. And maybe that's like what I'm seeing as taking things as face value. Maybe you just don't want to argue as much. Maybe you don't want to do as much research and you just hope for the best in everyone, because you see in life that, arguing and all this kind of stuff, this isn't worth your time. So maybe that's like what I'm taking as like taking things as face value, is taking, you know what, if you're going to express this and this is what you're going to present as your best self, then you know what, that's what I'm going to let it be. And that's how my grandma is. And if she sees someone and that's what you want to present to the world, then that's who you're going to be, right? And so maybe that's the ideology that I'm taking as face value, that is really just, if that's how you want to present to the world and you want to climb to the top and show your ass, and that's just what you're going to show, right? And that's something my grandma would say. Juliet is a very interesting human being. So that's just maybe what I'm seeing is something completely different. So if anybody disagrees with me, I would love to know more on how you see the world. So please let me know.
Thanks for sharing, Dawn. Kerri, did you want to go next?
Yeah, so I was just going to say, like, I know it may not be all older people, but I do find myself oftentimes, sorry, you guys might hear the echo. So I do find myself oftentimes telling my parents, like, oh, so I actually read this, or I actually read that, or I share like really specific articles with them. Right? Like I share like what they think is true or what they think is going on, but I'm like, no, but here's like this New York Times article. Or you know what I'm saying? Like things, my dad, I think recently got on Instagram. He hasn't fully told me yet. But I think I saw a little profile without an actual picture of him. And he's definitely on Facebook, but I am trying to get them to understand and to get them to see that like, these are the sources, right? So for me to do that, I have to send that to them because they're not dumb people. They went to college way before me. They've known things way before me. I go and I tell them, they're like, yeah, we knew that. You just wanted to wait for you to find it out. So they're not dumb people. It's just they grew up in an age where they can read things on newspapers. And so the news that they got and the news that they received was a credible source, right? And so even if it was some like small town newspaper that they stopped in, it was a credible source. And so they need to understand that it's not the same way in digital. And so that's the only thing I'm trying to make them understand. And I think from Michelle's perspective, I think because you're also a journalist, like you have that spirit to investigate, but also we have to consider the time that people really have that are not in the work of like investigating exactly what the news is saying. So for people that have parents that work long hours, and for people that have parents that are not, taking the time to actually do this, decipher through the news and what they get in terms of what pops up on their phone and what pops up on TV. I can't remember the last time I saw my parents reading an article and said, well, I went from this article to this article and then I researched about that. It's usually me, and I hate to say that, like, they're, like I said, extremely smart people, but like they just don't take the time to do that search like we do, because we have been hoodwinked and bamboozled for so long. Since we are digital natives, and we have been the people to click on the links that would say Beyonce is getting a divorce from Jay-Z, and then it's just like a Joker link, right? We have been there, so we just research every single thing now, right? One thing that I will say that I find very troubling is that people will share articles on Facebook from like 2 years ago and not look at the actual date.
Yep.
That is,
yeah. I saw that the other day and I was like, don't know why you're posting this, but okay.
That is the biggest thing that I have a problem with. And I think that is the most, I think that's the thing that worries me the most, because that is a multi-generational thing. That's not an old or young thing. That's a multi-generational thing. And so I don't know what we can do to get better news to the older generation, right? Because I will say that they probably do take it at face value, simply because like they've seen it all. Like nothing in the world is new half the time, right? We are just reliving and we're just going through cycles, and it's just a whole one big circle. And so oftentimes if we do say something or share something, it's like, yeah, I remember when this same person did that same thing. And I'm like, wait, so this isn't new?
Yeah, like, I mean, and we talk about, you know, what can we do to, like, again, you know, we talked about how younger Americans tend to be able to tell better fact versus opinion news statements on social media better than older Americans. And I think one of the possible solutions, we all have a role to play. Journalists have a role to play, but also people who read media have a role to play. And I think the common element is we have to prioritize media literacy. You know, going to J school, journalism school, and just like taking all of these classes, we had to, you know, learn about media literacy and just like being critical about all the information that we have online. With this 24-hour news cycle, it's information overload, but we have to think critically and just like come up with questions. We can't take everything at face value. We have to do some investigation. It's going to take time. It's going to take practice. Like I said, it's information overload, but we have to make that commitment, because if we want the media to really represent who we are as a democracy with freedom of speech and just news in general, we have to do the work. So I think that prioritizing media literacy is my number one. And I'm going to, you know, continue doing my best to verify everything that I find online, seeing with sources and just things like that. Those little steps make a big difference in what I produce and contribute to media and society. So.
And there's so many like YouTube videos and like I think professors now are like, is this fake news or real news, right? And they've even taken their time to like show people, and I try to circulate those when I see them. And for my yearbook class, I make sure they watch those every year. I'm like, is this real? Is this true? Right? Even as someone who's just going to observe it in a yearbook 30 years from now, are you presenting the most accurate truth that there is about what Murphy High School was like in 2019? You know? Mm-hmm. And so that's something that I teach my kids. I mean, they have to watch the Edpuzzle video on that and take the little quizzes in the video, and they can't click off, they can't fast forward. And make sure you're telling the complete truth and the most honest truth that you can. Because we see, like, as we're talking about it, how detrimental it can be to people who can't distinguish the difference, right? Mm-hmm. And that's something I think that society needs a little bit more of. And for my journalist friends out here, Sydney, Kerri, Michelle, like, please, like, if y'all can make videos and share those with people and use your platform to do that, do it and help people distinguish the differences. Because I'll show those to my children in my classrooms that are between the ages of 14 and 18, and they'll take that and they'll show that to other people, and they'll keep, you know, spreading the good word and the good messages about like how to be the best presenter of information that you can be. So I'm telling you that so you can make videos so I can show it to my kids.
That's great. I mean, that's actually something that I've been wanting to, like, propose and just like do little videos or little tutorials about it. The more information, the better. And I want to make it available to people. So I do want to transition to our last question. We are running out of time. This has been such a great conversation. I just thank you guys for joining me today. Okay, so our last question is, why is this upcoming presidential election important to you? Why should people vote?
I think there's so much on the line right now for so many people. Like, my family is directly affected because my husband is trans. So his rights are being rolled away as we speak. As a woman of color, as a minority, there's a lot of things that I'm at risk, so these changes, like the things that are being put in place, can directly harm either me and my family or people who look like me, people that I care about. And I think that something needs to change. And I also honestly really think that, this is just my opinion, if he were to get another term, that he would find a way to try to just not even leave the office. And we are just finding ourselves rolling into this totalitarian dictatorship, and we're on a slippery slope right now with women's rights to choose, women's rights to say what they can do or can't do with their body, with like just people coming here seeking asylum. We have like all these children at the border. We have right now the current situation where we have these women who are being given false hysterectomies, and it's like not even like the number one news thing, and it should be, but like no one's really even talking about it. And so like that's something, and the fact that we are conditioned at this point to just kind of accepting this bad behavior, in my opinion, that nothing is even shocking, that it like blips on the radar and then we kind of just move on from it. Like, oh my gosh, there's still kids in cages, and that should, like, there's no real national outrage. We just kind of just like, this is the way things are now. And so, it just keeps incrementally happening, and it's going to get to a point where it's just, well, it's already at a point where it's kind of dangerous. So I think that something needs to change, like ASAP.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Sharkisha.
Sorry about my daughter there.
That's okay.
The way I see it is that, if you look at yourself, let's say you can look at yourself. Everyone here that identifies as a woman is in trouble, in danger. But even if, let's say you look at yourself and you're like, I'm good, I'm fine, nothing to worry about. If you can look then at your friend group and you see no one in your friend group that's in danger, then you need to reevaluate the way that you're living your life, because that means that you are friends essentially with only rich white men, because those are the only people right now that aren't in trouble. So, I think there's so much at stake for everyone as a whole, but just, as a woman, I think if you can sit back and relax and just be like, whatever happens, happens, I'm not going to vote. If you can truly do that, I think that you should be ashamed of yourself. That's just, I couldn't do it. I know that my family members can't do it, even if they're not voting for the person that I want them to vote for. At least, they're voting and they're practicing a right that they have because of women in the past that have literally died for us to have this right. So, I think that this election, I can't say because I'm only 24, but it seems like this is one of the most important elections that's ever existed. The fact that we could potentially have a Black woman as our vice president, that to me literally is like, when I'll probably start crying, but like the fact that we can change that history and make that happen is unbelievable. So, if you're not scared for yourself, be scared for the people in your friend group, because there's someone that's worried. So
that was awesome. Thank you so much.
And yeah, definitely, like, I don't know, like, I was like, 2016 is important, but now I'm like, okay, how do I get people ID so they can vote? How can I make sure that they go out and vote? How can I make sure my little sister, even though she lives in Mississippi, but is technically a resident of Alabama right now, how can I make sure that she goes out and votes and make sure that her voice is heard? And like, that's something as a feminist, as a Black rights advocate, as someone who sees everybody, like, how do I make sure that you feel like you're heard? And I advocated for the census. I was like, hey, I'll be at brunch. I'm like, hey, did you do the census? You know, like, if you're in the LGBTQ community, sorry if that was a little slurred, like, we need you to do the census so that they can also acknowledge that your demographic exists. You know that, right? So like, I try to be as inclusive and as, involved in all types of people's lives, and I don't exclude anyone, and I don't judge people for the decisions they make to make sure that their lives are as happy and as loving, as joyful as they can be. And so I was scrolling through, my best friend Facebook the other day, aka last night, and I saw that there's this like whole pro-American education system that is now going to be put into the classrooms. And I was like, this is seeming a little Hitlerish, Hitler, very pro, all that, just a little, but I was like, I don't want that for my children. And I've been married almost 2 years now, and we're starting to think about kids, and I'm like, I don't want to bring kids into a world like this, and as someone who's going to be a mother of little Black children, my husband's white, but those children are going to be seen as Black. Like, how do I want them to be perceived by the world? What kind of world do I want them to be involved in? What kind of world do I want them to be believed in? And I've said this the last time I was on here. I already have a list of people who my kids are never going to see, right? And I don't want it to be a country that they never are going to see. So what can I do to encourage a country that's more inclusive? What can I do to encourage a place where my kids will feel seen and heard and believed, right? And that's why I think I'm so like, I even told my husband, you're going to vote. I said, I don't care who you vote for. We may not talk about it, but you're going to go out there and you're going to vote with me when the time comes. I said, because I want my children to have that right when it's their turn. And, and as we become, we're going to have pro-American education in the system. I was like, I posted on something the other day. I was like, they know they're in America. What do you mean? Right. Like, what are you really trying to get them to believe? Right. And I got really upset about it because there was a sign in the classroom, and it was an elementary school classroom. They're like, I believe Black lives matter. I believe that LGBTQ lives matter. I believe that feminist rights matter. And there were so many people like, oh, this is a classroom. Why do they have those politics in a classroom? Like, but they stand for the pledge. They are forced to say, I believe in God. I believe in one nation. Right? So you're trying to say, oh, they're believing in these rights that are not marginalized and mainstream are bad. And I was like, that's a classroom I want my child to be in. And I see so many educators around me that say the same thing. That's the classroom I want my kids to be in. That's a teacher I want them to feel like they can reside in and talk to and feel like they can be seen and heard and appreciated. So how is promoting America in an American country? I don't know how that feels to you, but they know where they are. I don't think anybody's that confused that they don't know that they're in America. It's very obvious with all of our American flags on literally everything and everything that you see. I think they know where they are, right? So we need to, as a country and as people, define what it truly means to be an American. And as we get involved in all these wars, we want democracy, but you're taking democracy away from people when you're telling them what to believe, right? And, I'm on my little TED Talk again, but as a woman of color, let me go back to my little talking points. I put on my little sticky notes. I am a big advocate for the LGBTQ community. I love America. I'm here. I haven't disappeared yet. I'm not an expat. It's coming. But, I want to believe in the best that this country can be, and I don't think we're there right now. And I think that's why I'm pushing this election so hard to literally everyone that I talk to. And I'm like, you may not believe the way I believe, but I want you to go and exercise this right to vote, and I want your voice to be heard because it matters. And I think our country has made people feel so many times that their voice doesn't matter. And I don't want anyone to feel like that's not true. And I'm going to stop talking because we only have 2 more minutes, and there are 5 more people that need to talk. Sorry.
That's fine. Thank you so much for sharing, Dom. Really appreciate it. Amen to that. Yeah, everything.
Can I go now?
Yeah.
So one thing I would also like to start with is that not only will we have a Black woman as vice president, not only could we possibly have a Black woman as vice president, we could have a Black Asian woman as vice president, right? And that in itself is powerful. If you've ever thought about what America looks like, it's just so weird to me, and it's so bizarre to me that people don't take a step outside of their neighborhood or even outside of their street, right? Outside of their door to see what America actually looks like. Because to some people, Kamala is a just an idea, right? Or it's just like, it's just a rarity. Like, she's not one of many, right? But in fact, Kamala represents so many people in America that it is so amazing that it has been such a long time coming. And I think that's the one thing that does make me hopeful. And I hope that's one thing that gets people out there to vote. Because at the end of the day, I love to just think about what that placement means for how we see America, as her being a Black Asian woman and her being the daughter of immigrants, and what that truly means for us. And then what I like to tell people, especially older people, I meet a lot of people that are between probably 26 and 35 that have not voted and never registered to vote. And so what I like to tell them is you take a chance with everything else, right? Like, you may gamble, you may put your money into this investment, you may do the give me 100 and I'll give you 200 back things. You may do all of that, but why don't you take a chance to vote? You lose nothing. You lose literally nothing, especially where I am in Washington State, where they mail you your ballot and you literally just drop it back in the mail. Postage is already paid. You just have to get yourself a pen. I don't think you can write it with blood. I don't think you can bubble it in with your finger. But I don't think your spit will fill the circles for you. You literally just have to get a pen. They bring you the ballot, and then you just put it back in the mail. You don't even have to go to the drop box. Just take a chance. For me, it just doesn't, like I said, it doesn't make sense. Because you take the chance on so many other things in life. Just take the chance and you will see what can come of it. I know a lot of people they just don't like to do the research on the candidates. That's something that I always push to make sure you are electing the people that you want to see in office. Because I fell victim to me telling my parents telling me who to vote for, right? And now I tell them, right? Because I've done the research and I've done the work, and it goes back to them just never doing the time and never taking the time to really do the work. And that's not on them. My mother worked literally from probably 16-hour days, 12 to 16-hour days. When we would go to the polls on a Tuesday or a Saturday morning, she didn't have that time. And I completely understand it now. I completely understand, because you read something and it says something else than what it really means, right? You read something and they say, vote yes to this, and you think voting yes to something is something that's actually going to benefit your community, but it's going to raise taxes for your community and only benefit the 2 districts away. We can get into that more and more, but if you're going to do it, first take the chance to do it and get registered, and then go ahead and then do your research on it. But always get registered as soon as you get the chance to. Many states are not as lucky as Washington to have same-day registration, and that is messed up. I think in some states you have to register a month beforehand. And so what happens if I'm 2 weeks before the election and I'm you know what, I got to make a change right now, right? What happens when that happens? If I've been on vacation, or, just simple things where we don't really take the time to understand how messed up it really is. Listen, Secretary of State, they can put you in the system in terms of what if you do it the day before, if you do it the day of, they can put you in the system, right? It shouldn't be that way, and we need better voting rights for everyone. And I also want to say finally that if the pandemic has taught us anything, I know we all circle our brain around this every single day, but if it's taught us anything, it is that we should take our government accountable and hold them accountable for what we deserve, right? We should hold them accountable. And how do we do that? By voting. I think that's, we can vote on how we vote. And I think that's the key thing right there. If you want voting to be more accessible, then you can vote on that, and you can elect people that makes voting more accessible. Because the government is there, and elected officials are there to protect us. Nothing else, you know, nothing less than that, right? Nothing, they're not there to give us like water bottles. They're not there to just give us, honestly, $1,200 to hold us over for 6 months. We'll talk about that in another discussion maybe, but they are there to protect us and say like, we are going to do this for the people and we're going to take care of them. Yes, I appreciate the stimulus check, but I still have a job. And I literally circle my brain around like, this is just in my savings account, but this could not even pay for someone's probably like living arrangements for the past 6 months. And I don't understand why you wouldn't want to change that. I fully can't comprehend. And one day I hope to be like Dominique and THERESA and have those conversations with people that are like outside of my framework and understanding why we don't have, you know, just equal opportunities and just basic human rights. Maybe I probably won't understand, but maybe I can hear from a perspective. But yeah, that's just my only opinion. Like, if your vote means that you are holding people accountable. That you can, I mean, you can't just walk up to people and say like, I voted for you, so you have to give me this. But you can surely say, you know, you are in office to serve me, and nothing more and nothing less.
Thanks, KERRI. And OFELIA, we're just wrapping up our last question about why is this election so important to you, and why should people vote? So if you want to comment before I turn it over to Michelle.
Just to add a quick comment. Sorry, I was having technical difficulties with my computer, but back. But to add to the conversation, I think it's important for people to vote because we could definitely see from the previous election how when people didn't vote, how it so heavily impacted us, the country. It definitely made Donald Trump get into office, and I feel it's very important to vote. And if you don't exercise that right, especially as a woman and woman of a minority, it's very important to vote because there is so much on the line for women. And I think if you don't vote, it's just really disheartening and sad because you're not exercising your right to make a better change, a better world for future generations to come. So yeah, I'm all for voting, and I really wish that everyone would vote, but we can't make everyone, and it's sad, but it's the truth.
Thank you so much. I really want to thank you guys. Before I wrap up with my final quote and call to action, I want to turn it over to Shade's founder and publisher, Michelle FITZHUGH-CRAIG.
Thank you, everybody. And for our guests, besides the crew are still on, and to the crew, we apologize. We've had some technical difficulties today. We've had people trying to get in, and I'm not sure what's going on, but I'll talk to you after about what we're going to do about that. I want to thank everyone again. Lindsay had to hop off the line, and Sydney, of course, but KERRI, Dominique, THERESA, OFELIA, and SHARKISHA, thank you so much. What you guys have to say always, it doesn't matter which part of the crew or all of the crew, like last time or here, you just have so much knowledge and inspiration. I'm looking forward to continuing this and hearing more from you in the future. Just to remind everyone watching, if you have questions that come to mind later, if you have ideas for future topics that we can do, or would like to become a part of Shades Magazine as a team member or a member of EWIP, Exceptional Women in Publishing, please contact us at info shadesmagazine@gmail.com, or DM us at any of our social media accounts. I do want to mention this little sign behind me. We have our EWIP conference, which is coming up October 3rd, and you can learn more at ewip.org on that and register. And I also want to let everyone know that one of our board members has created a voting guide for people of color, and you can find that by going to shadesmagazine.com, and there will be a logo there that can take you out and you can learn more. It's live time, so it's got all kinds of information on there. It is bipartisan. I mean, it's got a lot of good information, so I hope you share that with others too, because there's not really a guide that focuses on the needs and the concerns of people of color, and we've tried to make sure this one does. A final reminder, we were recorded today, and this video will be available on our YouTube channel beginning on Tuesday. And one last time, additionally, the opinions, viewpoints, and or personal endorsements expressed in today's video are those of the individual and do not necessarily represent the views of Shades Magazine or Women in Periodical Publishing, Exceptional Women in Publishing. So thank you again for joining us and putting up with the technical difficulties we had. And I'll turn it back to Sydney. Thank you.
Thanks, Michelle, for that. And so I want to leave with a quote from Stacey Abrams. And I think this quote is pretty relevant and timely. So here it is. Remember this in the darkest moments, when the work doesn't seem worth it, and change seems just out of reach. Out of our willingness to push through comes a tremendous power. Use it. And I think this quote can be applied to a lot of things, but since we're talking about elections, I think this tremendous power that Abrams mentions is the power of the vote in the ballot. So please, please vote, encourage your friends, families to participate, just become more knowledgeable about the election cycle, and, you know, encourage them to vote for the change that they want to see. So with that being said, thank you so much, everyone. Take care and be well. And I think the panelists and I are going to stay on with Michelle after. Thanks, everyone.